Today's guest is someone who brings clarity to one of the most confusing parts of business, your finances. Zachary Thomas is the founder of Growth Horizons Wealth Management, where he helps entrepreneurs and families take control of their money, plan for the future, and build true wealth. As a fee-only fiduciary and a fractional CFO, Zach works at the intersection of retirement planning, tax strategy, and business growth, making him a powerful ally for anyone in business who's serious about their future. Whether you're struggling with financial structure or ready to take it to scale, this conversation is going to give you the practical takeaways and fresh perspective. Let's dig in. Zach, welcome. I want to start with a question today that I think it really stood out to me. So I wanted to ask this one right off the top here, but what is strategic financial leadership?
A mouthful, I would say, first and foremost. It's a lot of words that hopefully mean something. I guess when we work with a lot of our small business owner clients, one of the things that we've noticed a lot is what helps a small business owner be successful in the first stage of their business isn't necessarily the skill set that takes them to that next level. So as somebody's scaling up to that $1 million mark and you finally hit it and you kind of ring the bell, right? Well, to go from 1 to 10 isn't the same skill set that you're going to need. And so generally, by the time we're getting introduced to a business owner, we're coming alongside them and helping them troubleshoot their problems. There's really, I guess, two different areas that we're leaning into and focusing a lot on. Number one, it's delegation. Secondly, it's automation. A lot of business owners, it's been our experience, tend to get in their own way. They want to take control because that's what's allowed them to be successful in the first place. But as they continue to scale and ramp up their organization, it becomes really important that they start to put in key leadership roles, whether that's thinking about building out an organizational chart, or maybe it's thinking about just surrounding yourself with some subject matter experts that you can delegate some of those roles and responsibilities. Specifically, one of the things that we see that is really impactful, it's almost humorous how much we see it, is the small business owner that, let's say, has a team of 5 to 10 that is still doing the bookkeeping themselves. And I just go, man, that cannot be fun. Like, do you just enjoy being 11 o'clock at night, you've worked all day, and then you're going to crack open QuickBooks and you're going to go through and sort some transactions? Like, man, just get that off your plate. So in a nutshell, that's what we mean by strategic leadership.
I like that. So for those that have not met you yet, let's take a step back. So tell us just super quick, give us the overview of what your business is, and then I'd love to learn a little bit more about what got you into the industry overall, right? Like what were some of those early catalyst moments for you as you moved into it?
Yeah, I would say that we're at the integration of two different professions or specializations. So I guess I'll kind of walk you through the traditional financial advisor and the traditional accounting firm. So the traditional advisor, typically just wants to talk about helping wealthy people or cash flow positive, people invest in the stock market, which is awesome. That's great. And we do that for a handful of clients. Then you have the traditional CPA firm that is backward focused. They're looking at everything in reverse. And we try to build the bridge between those two different professions. So I have a background as a wealth manager, as a financial advisor. But along the way, I've learned to speak the language of the CPA and take that analytical mindset and apply it towards a forward growth-oriented stance to help the business owner think about, articulate what it is they're hoping to accomplish, and then actually back into a specific strategy that they can execute on by being really tactical with the way that we think about the financial operations inside of their organization.
So you mentioned that the integration between these two things. Is there a lot of other folks out there that are kind of bridging the gap between these two industries?
I've yet to find anybody else who does specifically what we do in the way that we do it. We offer a lot of services that other financial advisors do, We do a lot of, I guess you would say, consultation work that accounting firms do, but I haven't found anybody that's building the bridge between those two different things, and not only helping the business owner think about what it means to be successful in their business and specific benchmarks and KPIs that they want to meet in their business, but how does that transform their personal lives? A lot of the things that we see and we try to work through is, what do you want your family life to look like? What do you want your health, to be? How much time do you want to be spending in the business? We do not put on the hat of coach. We love to recommend for our business owners to be working with a coach so that when those topics come up, because they will inevitably, we can say, hey, that's a really good topic. I'd like for you to go dig in the next time that you have a meeting with your coach, and unpack and spend some time thinking about that. And then we can get back to what we do really well, which is articulating what that goal is, where we're striving as a business, and then backing into the specific strategy and executing and doing that with excellence.
Why do you think there's such a gap with the fact that this bridge doesn't exist, or that you even haven't come across of a lot of other professionals or businesses that do simply what you do? Mm-hmm. And I would tend to agree. There tends to be a lot of siloed this industry, silo over here for this industry, and there tends to be some missing gaps between a lot of different folks, not just in the financial side, but whether it be the legal side or the operational side. Why do you think that is? As you sit in this kind of core spot on the financial side for businesses and individuals, why do you think that why is there such a need for this bridge between the two?
Yeah, it does exist. It just doesn't exist for the subset of the market that we're talking about. So, if you're worth $100 million and up, you probably have this type of team built around you. So maybe one of the terms that your audience is familiar with is family office. And if you're not, you should probably go look up what a family office is. This is the personal extension of business consultation and advice that Fortune 500 investment banks are offering to their very affluent clients, or these people are building their family offices out themselves. So you probably hear a lot about venture capitalists and private equity firms. There are a lot of very affluent business owners that are building all this stuff themselves from scratch. And so having dibble-dabbled in that world, mostly with a middle market audience. So I worked for a multifamily office. We had a vertically integrated CPA firm, law firm, wealth management, insurance firm. And my job was mostly applying my skill set as a wealth manager and I guess you would say, relational quarterback. I helped our business owners navigate how to intersect with each one of the different professionals that were on staff with the firm that I worked with. We helped them build a vision for what they were hoping to accomplish, and then we backed in tactically with each one of those different disciplines. So it definitely does exist. It just exists at a higher tier of the market, and most people, I guess, who have my skill set or background, that's where the money is, right? So like if you want to be a consultant, what do? You go work for a Big Four, you go work for Deloitte or McKinsey or one of those big guys. You asked me a little bit about my story, so I'll just kind of share real quickly. My grandfather was a small business owner. He got into franchising in the late 60s, Kentucky Fried Chicken specifically. He in his prime had 7 or 8 restaurants, did extraordinarily well, and he retired at the ripe old age of 45. I can probably hear like some of the envy from some of the people who are listening to this. Man, I wish that would have been me. And he did great. Unfortunately, along the way, he partnered with some bad advisors and he made some bad decisions. Mm-hmm. And so by the time I came around, what could have had the capacity to be multi-generational wealth was squandered. My grandparents now live on Social Security checks and a few real estate investments. They're doing all right. They don't miss a meal, right? They have a roof over their head. But certainly not the opportunity that it could have been. And so that's a burning passion of mine because I saw it firsthand. I saw what good planning could have done if my grandfather would have had the right types of advisors around them. And so It means a lot more hard work on our end because we're typically starting from a different starting point than somebody who has $100 million. We're trying to get people to think a little bit bigger, with what it is that they want. But it doesn't feel like work for me. It feels like an extension of play. It's fun. There are aspects of it that maybe aren't so fun. But each and every day, we just get to help people build the lives that they want to build. And ultimately, we get to see people have an impact on our community. Now, that's something that means a lot to me. We work with a lot of blue-collar business owners. So I can drive down the road, and I have a vision 10, 20, 30 years from now, driving my kids down the road and pointing at all the buildings that were built, not for my labor, of course. I sit behind a laptop most of the time. But to have the opportunity to say, I got to play a part in that, that's something that really drives and motivates me.
That's amazing. And I think the story really brings home, the power behind why you do what you do. But there was a couple of things in there, and you'd mentioned, helping some of these business owners specifically think bigger than they would have otherwise, and building the life that they want to build. How does that look? For many of the audience listening in right now, some of them maybe are really good at this, thinking a little bit bigger and maybe putting some dreams out there and what's my life meant to look like. And there may be some others out there that maybe need some permission to dream a little bit bigger. How do you navigate through that? What does that look like with many of your clients?
Yeah, I'll share with you two stories that are on the opposite ends of the spectrum that I think would be helpful. So we have one couple that we work with. It's a family-owned business. Both of the examples that I'm going to share from, they're both general contractors. So they work with their hands for a living. Specifically, they do a lot of build-outs and renovations. And the first client, whenever we started talking, he was just kind of at the end of his rope. He had a good business. He was doing about $4 million top line. He was netting out somewhere between $1.5 to $2 million a year. But he was just kind of done. He was tired of working. He'd been doing this for 25, 30 years, and he was thinking about what was next. And so when we started having conversations, I was just kind of coaching them through, the transition planning process. Hey, you're too small, most likely to get acquired by a private equity firm. Have you thought about maybe doing some internal succession planning and grooming up somebody underneath you? And that was a really attractive conversation. And about 6 months into our relationship, he decided that I guess he wasn't done with building and took on about 3 or 4 additional projects. And it's only been, so that engagement started about 3 years ago. And about 2 months ago, we had a conversation and said, hey, you remember what we originally talked about when we first started working together? I think I want to go back to that. I think I'm just done in this season and I'm ready to throw my hands up. And so we had a really long conversation. And I just encouraged him, life is seasons. Nothing lasts forever. And his vision when we first started working together was he wanted to buy a sailboat, and he and his wife wanted to sail around the world. They're empty nesters. So as he was putting it all together, his number one question was, can we afford to do this? I started running the numbers, and on the face of it, no, you can't do it. But as we started dialoguing, I encouraged him, hey, you already run your business virtually most of the time anyways. Have you thought about just delegating some of these additional responsibilities, making sure that your crew is really well compensated? And that could give you the capacity to take off and go and sail around the world. So we're actually working through a plan right now where over the next 18 months, they're going to start taking 2-week vacations, 1 month, 2 month, 3 month, to actually stress test the business and see what breaks whenever they're away from the business, because that's something that they've never done. So that's one example of, I guess a persona of the type of individual that we're working with. Another individual, let's say, has more of a growth mindset. This is another general contractor. He does about $7 million top line, netting out about $2 million. He does really high-end development work. The stuff that he builds is beautiful, like $20 million mansions. It's just incredible to see what he does. And when we started working together, he was just frustrated with doing the client work. And he didn't feel like he was building something for himself. He had a cash flow positive business. He had a great crew, treats his employees really, really well, and wants to make sure that they're well compensated. But I asked him the question, hey, have you guys ever thought about doing some development work yourself? And man, his eyes just like lit up instantly. Like I would love to get to that point, but I just don't think financially that we can like pull it off. And so I said, okay, let's actually put that to some numbers and see if this is something that you could do. And the long story short of it is we ended up figuring out that he needed to do about 50% of what his current capacity was to get to break even and have a little bit of margin. But he could actually take that other 50% and he could reinvest it into doing development work that he owns instead of doing development work for somebody else. And so he actually has aspirations to 2x or 3x the business over the next 5 to 10 years. And at the same time, he wants to start building out his own real estate portfolio. So those are, I guess, two ends of the spectrum in terms of, I guess, each individual has a vision for what it is that they want to accomplish. And I think the bigger question is, what is it that you're hoping to build? And then the way that we try to partner with the people that we work with is how can we come alongside and just support what it is that you want to build? I don't want to be the person that comes in and points fingers and says that's a dumb idea or that's not going to work. I've been doing this long enough to know that you should never doubt an entrepreneur. They will find a really creative way to pull off whatever it is that they say that they're going to do. And I just want to come along and I want to support them and encourage them, but also help ground and focus them in the things that matter most. Because it's really easy for us as a small business owner myself to get lost in the KPIs and what our business definition of success is, and maybe put on the back burner some of the other things that are really important, like spending time with our family, like making memories, whenever our kids are young, or whatever it is, that looks like for you in your personal life.
I really like that. In the fact that you had mentioned the fact that, as entrepreneurs can be sometimes a bit difficult to take that step back and say, what do I want that's beyond this business success, right? I know in our world, we tend to see a lot of the identity is very much wrapped up in the business. Yeah. And unfortunately, that tends to mean when I am asked what success looks like, the definition of success is my business is doing X, Y, and Z, not my business is doing X, Y, and Z so that I can do these things and live this life. So I think it's really cool to kind of see that, there are folks like yourself out there that are helping kind of bridge that gap between that business owner mindset in the weeds every day into kind of here's what life is meant to be like and how do we help your business help you get there. So when we do talk kind of the business side of things, you're working closely with business owners, doing a bit of the fractional CFO type work. What are the most common kind of financial blind spots or things that tend to get overlooked by many of these smaller business owners specifically?
Cash flow, man. I could just say it over and over again. Cash flow planning. Business owners, they know their numbers. They know how profitable they are. But if you ask most of them at any given point in time, how much money do you have in your bank account? Well, hold on, I got to go, check, or like we have this outstanding invoice and we're going to collect it. It's unfortunate how bad the planning is whenever it comes to cash flow planning. And I guess depending on what type of business you have, if you have a service-based business, it's probably easier for you to be able to do cash flow planning because you have recurring sales that are going to come in every month that's going to float it. But if you're in a business that doesn't have that luxury and you're chasing after invoices, man, I work in a service-based business, right? And probably the number one thing that I do as a business owner is meticulously do my cash flow planning because it's the only way that I can forecast where I'm going. And I can ask the big questions of, okay, I want to make this next hire, or I want to start this marketing campaign. Do I have the ability to be able to pull it off? And a lot of times what I see with business owners is they double count dollars in their bank account. Tell me if you've ever heard this one before. Somebody who had mentally set aside a tax bill, and then April comes around and they double spent the money in their account by taking on that next big job or hiring that next person because they thought that they had already taken the tax bill off their plate. That's something, even with really good clients of ours that we work with, I constantly just have to beat that into their head. It's like we have to know where we're at from a cash flow planning standpoint. Otherwise, it's going to be extremely difficult for you to be able to do any type of forecasting or goal setting for where you want to go in the future. The good news is once you get in the process of systematizing that and you learn what works specifically for your business, man, you can run really hard and really fast and have a lot of confidence in the decisions that you're making.
So let's talk cash flow for a minute, because we can kind of nerd out on this one for a little bit. What I haven't told you is I am totally the numbers guy within our business. Like I could dive down a deep rabbit hole on this. But I would agree. Cash flow is such an important component that tends to be often overlooked. I guess from my experience, it hasn't necessarily been because they don't want to, but more there is a level of skill that's required to kind of know how this is done, and maybe they haven't connected with the right professional help them work through that yet. When you're working with many of your clients, maybe it's a little bit different depending on industry, but do you traditionally recommend a weekly review of cash flow forecast? Is it a monthly view of it? And how many weeks or months out in a forecast would you traditionally recommend?
Yeah, I think it depends on the individual goals that the business owner has. Let's say that this is a very growth-oriented, early-stage company. You should know almost on a daily basis what's coming in and what's going out, because that has the capacity to bring your business to an immediate halt. If you start having bills bounce, if you have payroll that does not go through, that is going to create a lot of headaches. Let's say for a more mature business that has a cash buffer that they know that they can fall back on, probably not as important, and they don't need to focus on it. So early stage company, I would say every week to every 2 weeks, probably have a good grasp of, where you're at, minimum 1 month from my perspective. If you're a more growth oriented, business, you have a nice cash buffer, probably on a quarterly basis. And for a more mature organization, I would probably coincide the cash flow planning meeting with your tax planning meeting, because the two for a business like that tend to coincide together, because you're typically taking that cash and you're trying to offset your tax liability at the end of the year, and you have the capacity to put specific tax strategies in place that a growth-oriented company doesn't have, but they also don't have the tax liability as well. So, if you're netting out $5 million a year, you have way different problems than, a company that is trying to, not close their doors a month from now.
Yeah, definitely the conversation of how do I deploy this capital back into different things versus the how do I keep the lights on? Yep. No, I absolutely love that. And, I've shared it in kind of previous conversations. I haven't shared with you, about 3 years ago, our business went through a bit of a cash flow issue where we did not have proper forecasts in place, and boy was that a mistake on our end. And being able to put the cash flow forecast in place and get that habit in place to consistently update it and take a look at and know what's happening in the business completely changed the game for us. So I'm at the point where probably don't need to do it this frequently now, but I've got a weekly cash flow forecast that we take a look at, and it looks out an entire quarter. Mm-hmm. And it's updated daily. Yeah. So I can see exactly what's happening if we get sales, don't get sales, and that sort of thing, and be able to see, when can we make these next hires? Mm-hmm. What levers can I pull a month in advance if things aren't going a proper direction? So I absolutely love that, and just felt it would be good for the audience to kind of really hear kind of some reasons why it's important to do it, even though it does take a little bit extra skill, or hiring some team members or other folks like yourself to come in and help with that process is that critical, because the number one reason that businesses will go out of business is they run out of cash, right? So big piece there. So kind of on that note, you and I were talking a little bit before, and you had mentioned collaboration. Collaboration with CPAs, with attorneys, with other folks on kind of the business or financial teams. Why is collaboration so important in your industry?
I think I can say this with confidence. I would ask your audience, after you've been running your business all day long, do you come home and look forward to mowing your own grass? Do you have a cleaning service or somebody in your household that makes sure that you have clean laundry? Or is that something that you're doing? I would venture to say that most of the business owners that are probably listening to this have already gone through the process of delegating, of putting in a team around them for things on the personal side of the house. We tend to treat our businesses like our babies, and it's hard to let go of control. Collaboration is important because you just don't know what you don't know. And generally speaking, if somebody's been there and done that, they probably have a lot of experience that you can leverage and lean on, and it allows you to run a lot faster, a lot farther when you're focusing on what you do best. If I had to guess, most of the people listening to this probably are not cash flow spreadsheet nerds like you and I are, right? You probably don't want to do that. I wake up in the morning looking forward to having the opportunity to have that conversation with clients, right? So I guess my pushback is like, why wouldn't you want to get those things off of your plate? Like, what do you do really good in your business? Wouldn't you want to spend more time doing that? I think that's the bigger question. What do you, if you could wave a magic wand and you could just do what you want to do in your business, that's it. Like, you have permission to allow yourself the freedom to build that type of business. But it also means you have to learn how to ask for help, right? And it also means, and I think this is where some of the friction can come from, sometimes we put our trust in people who break or violate that trust. That's really hard to overcome and come back from. And I can share from my own personal experience of having some misfortunes with people that I've partnered with in the past before, or let's say taken on the wrong types of clients. You're going to be so much better off in the long run if you just mentally realize that you're probably going to get burned at some point along the way, and you just have to keep on moving forward. It's a numbers game. We're all numbers people, right? It's the same thing with sales. You know that you're going to get a certain amount of no's before you get a certain amount of yeses. When you're delegating out, when you're building a team, when you're partnering with strategic advisors, you're going to have some bad experiences, and you need to factor that into your expectations. And the way that I try to coach the clients that we work with, because one of the things that we do a lot, one of the first things that I try to bring up is, tell me the team that you have in place, where are the gaps, where are the holes. Let's go find you the people that you need that are going to support you, because I know that I can't do it all myself. You're probably going to put your trust in me. You're going to expect me to be all these people to you, but I can't be all these people to you. So let's go find these people. And then I try to encourage them, like, okay, we had a good first conversation. Like, maybe let's not move the entire bank account balance over to Mr. Banker just because he told you that you're the prettiest girl at the prom. Like, maybe we start off with a little bit, and if they do a good job with it, then we can expand that relationship over time. So that's typically the way that we try to coach people through the process of thinking about collaboration and partnering with people is you can learn a lot by just giving a little and seeing how people steward the opportunities that you give them. You don't necessarily have to turn them over the keys to your house and expect that they're not going to steal all your stuff because you just met them and you had a good conversation.
There's so many really important points in there that, I really want the listeners to come back and think about. The first one is, that the delegation piece. And there are going to be things that I'm sure you're thinking through that you don't enjoy doing and really should be delegated off in some way, shape, or form. I'll give a quick kind of book recommendation, I suppose, on my end, just because it's top of mind. I've been rereading Dan Martell's Buy Back Your Time. I'm not sure if you've read that one yet, Zach, or not, but there's a lot of this that, from a financial aspect, I think he puts it in some really good terms and understanding, like, if you're valued at something that's a higher rate than what you can go and essentially get a job done for, mowing your lawn is a great example of it, then you have an obligation to yourself and to your team and to everyone else around you to essentially get that off your plate so that you can go fill it with higher value tasks or start to essentially buy back some of the time. So I think it's a really important piece. But as you look at these things, it's important to think about, how do you do this in a way that doesn't overwhelm your clients? And I'm curious on that for you. Before we kind of move into some additional questions in this conversation, when you start working with a new client, they come to you, starting to kind of look at how do I work with someone I haven't worked with before? how do you ease them into the relationship without totally overwhelming them?
Yeah, try to ask them questions specific to, like, what is it that you want to accomplish and what are your biggest pain points? And they'll typically go through and they'll emotionally vomit all over me, because I would say 80% of what we do is behavioral therapy, and 20% of it is probably financial, but I enjoy that. And so I've been doing this so long that I know how to kind of wade through the information, and you can just hear in people's voice when there's a real pain, that they're leaning into. And so I guess for me, it's just been a process of learning how to listen, how to ask good follow-up questions, and how to get people to elaborate and articulate on an area that I think could be a major point of pain, with where they're at in their business or in their personal life. And then we typically distill that down into 2 or 3 different steps. Hey, here's what we're going to work on first, right? Here's the laundry list of all the things. We were listening. We heard you, right? But now we have to create a hierarchy and we have to prioritize these things. And we're not going to do all of it tomorrow. We're going to do it in a process. So let's start off by focusing on what's going to give you the highest ROI. And I just ask for permission. Hey, this is what I heard. Would you say that these are your top 3 biggest pain points with where you're at in your business right now? And 80% of the time they'll say, yeah, you got that right. And then 20% of the time, I think you might have read into that a little bit more. No, it's actually these things over here. Okay, that's fine. But just making sure that we're both communicating, that we're understanding what it is that they're expecting from us, and then coming to the table and providing them a strategy that they can execute on that are going to help them to alleviate some of those pain points. And I would say the majority of the time, especially when we're working with a client for the very first time, it seems like we're typically focusing on helping them build the team around them, either internally or externally. So it's either thinking about coaching their existing team up or coaching them out, or it's, I don't have the right type of strategic advisors in place, and I think that that's too expensive, and I typically have to go through and help coach them through the process of, you're going to be stuck in this spot until you get to the point where you can have an open hand with this thing that you feel like you need to hold on to. And so there's a lot of patience and there's a lot of grace, and we learn to just move at the pace that people are willing to trust us with. And I've been doing this, close to 10 years now, and so I've just seen time and time again, as trust is developed, they give us more to work with. And so that's where, it's generally about 3 to 6 months into the engagement where I feel like we're starting to hit our stride, and I'm starting to get a lot of positive feedback, and I can see the client is trusting us with more and more. And then they start coming back to us and saying, like, hey, I've got this other thing, and I didn't share it with you whenever we did the initial discovery, but now I'd really like your opinion and your feedback on this other thing that I have going on. That's one of the most special parts about what we do, is having the ability to build that level of trust and having the opportunity to be able to speak into people's lives in a meaningful way that really impacts the stakeholders, the employees, the end client, being able to take a step back 12 months after we've been in an engagement and go, wow, would they have been able to finish that project if we didn't come alongside and help give them the confidence to do? I don't know, but I like to think that we did have an impact, a positive impact on them.
I love that. In being in business for 10 years plus at this point, I'm sure you've learned a lot of things along the way. As we look kind of towards the future then, what are you digging into right now to prepare for the future? Either professionally, personally, what are you digging into from a learning perspective that's helping you continue to grow?
Sure. 2 sides of the spectrum. I'll start off with the easy one, and then I'll back into the harder one. The easier one for me is I'm currently working on my certified financial planner designation. It's something that's been on my list for 10 years since I decided this is what I wanted to do. I've had all the educational requirements for 4 years, and running a business and having a family and young children, it's just one of those things that's important, but maybe not urgent. And so I'm finally in a season where I have the capacity. I'll be sitting for that exam in a couple of weeks from now. So hopefully by the time a lot of people are listening to this, I'll have the marks behind my name. So you can go look me up on LinkedIn and see if I got a thumbs up or a thumbs down. I've done a lot of, I guess you would say, professional development ever since I was like a teenager. So that kind of stuff comes easy to me. What I would say, I've gone through a process of relearning a lot of things about myself. Is probably before 2 or 3 years ago, I thought that fiction and myth was just something for like little kids. And I started off reading Donald Miller's Build Your Story brand. I'm sure it's a book that you're familiar with.
Yep.
And I was reading through some Joseph Campbell at the time, who was an English literature professor, who actually identified the stages in every mythological story. So he was a savant whenever it comes to ancient mythological stories, and he broke it down into a multi-sequence step. And this is what actually most books, most movies, most TV series use to be able to design their shows. It's not an algorithm per se, but it's a pretty good multi-step process. It was made most famous by George Lucas. He took, it's called the hero's journey, took the hero's journey and he applied it to Star Wars. So Donald Miller basically just took that whole concept and he put a marketing label on top of it. And so that started me down this entire pathway of just rediscovering my love for fiction and for ancient mythology. And man, I can tell you, I've learned more about myself. I've learned more about how to treat people. I've learned more about how to run my business than any business book I've ever read. And I've read a lot of business books, like 15 years of doing nothing but reading nonfiction business and philosophical, books. And I'm finding that I'm learning way more about myself through my rediscovery of myth and fiction. And so right now I'm actually reading through the Lord of the Rings. I've never picked it up before. And I'm finding so much beauty in at least the first part of the story, and I can connect with Frodo's desire to just want to stay in the safety and the stillness of the Shire, because that's kind of the season of life I am right now with a young family. And so I'm appreciating those moments. But Frodo also knows the adventure is at hand. It's coming, right? He's stewarding the ring, and at a certain point, it's time to leave the Shire behind and it's time to go on that next adventure. So for me, I'm taking hopefully some of those lessons and I'm learning to integrate it. And it's giving me a different perspective on the way that I interact with people around me, on the way that I run my business. And I like to think that I'm a better professional. I'm a better husband. I'm a better father as a result of taking some of those lessons and applying it to my life. So hopefully I give all that context to say, I'm sure a lot of the audience that is listening to this are probably where I was a couple of years ago, like kind of just put the fiction off the back burner. It's okay. Give yourself permission. Go pick up a fun book. You might learn something about yourself in the process.
It's such an interesting concept. And yeah, I'll raise my hand as one of the individuals who very much nonfiction. A lot of the fiction did get put up on the shelf, and have not gone as much into it. But to your point on some of Donna Miller's stuff and story brand and understanding the construct of what story is, sometimes that can get lost. Mm-hmm. And being able to go back to really well written fiction to see different perspectives and how that actually can tie into what we do here in our actual lives and things like that is actually very powerful. So I actually really enjoy that and appreciate that you kind of shared it, because I know that's not something that traditionally comes up in most business conversations. So I do want to ask you kind of at least one question on the topic of AI, and then we'll go into a couple rapid fire questions to wrap up here today. But being in the financial world, knowing that this wave of what AI is today does not appear to be slowing down. It's not going to go away. How do you see this, impacting your industry, and what, if anything, are you doing at this point to kind of prepare for that?
Sure. That's a really good question. I guess I would say that I'm typically pro technology, but everything belongs in its proper place. And too much of a good thing can be a bad thing. I first became interested in financial services probably 15, 20 years ago. And at the time, the big story was that robo-advisors were going to displace all of the financial advisors, that you can go work with a robo-advisor for 25, 30 basis points. Why do you need to pay a financial advisor 1%? What you would actually learn, if you looked at some of the industry data, is there is an explosion in the wealth management space. There's not enough people who are doing what we were doing. Now, I do the fractional CFO work, but I also do the financial advisor work. So I'm kind of talking from the wealth management standpoint right now. There's an explosion. There's not enough people who can offer the services for the amount of people who need the help. And so what you find is a lot of advisory firms are just continuing to raise their minimums because they're inundated with too many opportunities. So where am I at specifically on AI? I would say it's going to allow firms like ours to run a lot leaner and a lot faster, and to focus on what we do best. You know what I do not do best? Marketing funnels, task management, record keeping, note taking. You know what does that really efficiently? AI. I over the years have become, like a daily ChatGPT user. Some of it is from an administrative standpoint. Some of it is it can be a good thought partner, and I've kind of trained it to think the way that I've think, and that takes some time. So I would say overall, cautiously optimistic on where we go from here. But I think with anything, once you open up Pandora's box, it creates a whole subset of problems that are generally better problems than you had before. If you were to go back to the 1940s and you were to tell somebody about a tractor that worked on a farm, they would probably be terrified that it was going to put them out of work, right? Now you talk to a farmer about a tractor, and their biggest problem is, I got to fix this darn thing every so often. It's like, how many people has a tractor replaced on a farm? 40, 100? I don't know what it is, right? I think technology is going to allow us to unlock our highest form of what it means to be human, which is unlocking that creativity domain, and hopefully getting people out of the laborious, boring, deadening, life-sucking aspects of work that we really don't enjoy doing in the first place. So that's me being an optimist whenever it comes to AI. I think that's hopefully the best case use. I think that there's also going to be some tragic missteps along the way with the way that it's being used. One of the things we're really mindful of with our business is there's now technology that allows people to utilize voice recordings specifically to take advantage of elderly people. So now little Grandma Sally is getting a phone call from her granddaughter that she has been kidnapped by the mafia. She needs to wire out $100,000 for them to be released. This is not something I'm making up. It's not prolific yet, but it's getting there. And so we're already having to put in safeguards in place to be able to authenticate and coach our clients, especially our elderly clients, that what they think is real might not be actual, it might not be based in reality. And fortunately, we have not had to actually confront that situation, but we're already building safeguards in place because we know that the implications for AI with fraud, specifically for elderly people, is going to be have a real impact for anybody in the financial services industry.
It's a really good point. And I love the positive side and a bit of the potential negative or downsides. And you're right. There's a lot of those risks that are becoming more prevalent. There's always been risk in, call it digital financial space, for the last several decades, but new and different ways can pop up, and that doesn't mean that we can't fight them or put safeguards in place, but it does require a little bit of paying attention and knowing kind of what's new and what's different out there, and being able to pay attention to that. So as we wrap up here, Zach, got a couple questions I'd love to ask just to get a couple additional wisdom nuggets out for the audience. But when you think back on your journey so far, what's been the most impactful or most memorable piece of advice that you've received?
Slow down. I've had the opportunity to have some incredible mentors, and in my early 20s I ran really hard, really fast, and thank God that I woke up to the reality that I was on a dangerous trajectory of abandoning all the other important things in my life. And over the course of some bad decisions, of some missteps, I realized that I was putting all of my focus on one important aspect of my life. And so my life looks dramatically different than it did 7 years ago, because I had specifically some incredible men that came alongside me and said, hey, Zach, I think you're over prioritizing some of your professional stuff. Maybe you need to make space. Maybe you need to create some margin for some of the other important things in your life, like your family, like your marriage, like your health. Those things are important too.
It's a really good piece of advice. I always like to ask for a book recommendation, but I'm going to shift it slightly. And it's going to be, what book do you tend to either gift or recommend the most?
So hard because so context dependent, and so I'm trying to think from a generalization. I guess I have recently been on such this fiction kick, and I'm around a bunch of type A guys mostly, that I've just been trying to encourage people to pick up a piece of fiction. So if I was going to stay in that lane, I've become like a total Dune nerd. That was actually the first fiction book that I picked up in 15 years. Probably the last fiction book that I picked up was in middle school, which was probably Harry Potter. That was the last one that I remembered. And, it wasn't until, I don't know, probably 2 years ago that I picked up Dune. And I only picked up Dune because of the things that we talked about, but then I watched the movie and I was like, oh my gosh, like if there's going to be a book that I'm going to pick up and I'm going to read through, it's going to be that. And so I walked away with a better understanding of who I was as a person, of the way that the world works, through going through and slowly, whenever I think about reading, I'm a big podcaster. I'm big on audiobooks. I think there's a huge amount of value in forcing yourself to slow down and physically pick up a book and physically read it, because that's not my typical disposition. I typically want to be the person that multitasks, and it's really hard for me to cultivate a habit of sitting down and actually reading a book. And so that's something that I've had to reintroduce into my life and carve out and create the space for that. So if there was a book in this season of life that I would probably recommend to people, generally speaking, it would be just pick up a piece of fiction. Like, it's okay if it's something you've read before. Maybe you'd be a little bit adventurous and pick up something you haven't read before. For me, Dune is probably the thing that speaks to me the most.
Very cool. I love that. For Zach, for the listeners, how can they get in contact with you? What are the best ways to follow you, to get in contact, to learn a little bit more about the amazing work that y'all are doing? Where can we advise them to go?
Sure. Growth Horizons, WM, as in wealth management, growthhorizonswm.com is where you can find all the information about the services that we offer. I'm also very active on LinkedIn, Facebook in terms of socials, and our website has all of our contact information as well if you want to send me an email, or we also have phone numbers on there for contact information as well.
Amazing. I love it. Encourage y'all to take a minute, go reach out, say hi, say I saw you on the podcast, and drop a comment, something like that on the amazing conversation. So Zach, thank you so much for being here and being willing to share a little bit about you and the amazing lessons you've learned along your business journey.
Thanks, Tanner, for having me.